G'day guys and gal. When you think of the biggest, scariest, most badass marines to ever live, you probably think of Asterion Moloch, Sigismund, Tybros the Redwake, Abaddon, and so on. You probably don't think of the giant nerd, Alexis Polux. However, wars are rarely won via two heroes punching each other to death. I mean, sometimes they are. However, generally it's large-scale tactics, organization, and so on. Alexis was a beast of commander, almost outplaying Perturabo, surviving a duel with Conrad Kurz, and he was said to be so large that even Gilliman was unnerved to speak to him, not used to talking with space marines almost as large as himself. When I say Alexis was a big nerd, I mean big. Easily one of the biggest space marines to ever live. So combine his epic girth with his brilliant mind, and yet one of the biggest beasts in all of Warhammer, and I think that's worth talking about. Before we get started, we have a juicy major mini launch for you today, featuring the Crimson Fist, a large galactic warrior who can protect just as much as he can attack, featuring custom armor, 2 head variants, a big ass melter gun power fist, and a big ass shield. Nothing is getting past this big lad. We made him pretty bloody tall, so if you proxy him in Horus Heresy, he'll stand above the rest as he should, whilst that extra height makes him fit in well with 40k armies. It's a win-win. The Crimson Fist continues a long line of recent releases, dozens of new major minis coming out all the time with more in the way. The best part is that it's only $10 shipping worldwide, or free if you pick up enough models in a bundle. The models are made using a custom blend of proprietary major mini resin, designed for detail and strength. Seriously, I'm yet to find a resin as good as the one we have formulated, and we have tested dozens. Link is below. Today we'll go over why Alexis Polux is an absolute beast, focusing more on his highlights and achievements rather than just a retelling of his entire lore. Let's get into it. Alexis was a native of Inuit, the home system of Rogel Dawn, and grew up on that brutal ice world. He was chosen as a natural candidate to join the Imperial Fists, but would suffer an immense tragedy during his trials. See, Alexis had a twin, Helios, who was completing the trials with him. Helios saved Alexis from a predator beast during one of the final trials, but was left dangling off the edge of a cliff, only Alexis's grip keeping him from falling. Both men were exhausted and wounded, and were, fucking big as. Alexis could not drag his brother up no matter how hard he tried. Helios made the hard decision to let go, sacrificing himself to make sure Alexis would live on. This really fucked with Alexis. He always thought Helios was the stronger of the two and was more worthy to live and become an Imperial Fist. Hence he developed pretty obscene imposter syndrome, thinking himself unworthy, hence he constantly trained his mind and body, seeking to be worthy of Helios' sacrifice but always believing he fell short. This resulted in a space marine who was incredibly humble, incredibly hardworking, and would not overlook any detail. Alexis's attitude made him rise high in the Legion, a role he felt unsuited for, but since he wasn't in total command of anything too serious, he was able to deal with it. However, he was quite literally thrown in the deep end when Rogel Dawn sent about 30,000 Imperial Fists to act as a retribution fleet, hoping they could catch an enemy legion unaware and destroy them. Originally, Sigismund was supposed to lead the fleet, but due to the advice of Kila, a saint of the Emperor, he stayed on Terra to fulfill his destiny. Hence another captain, a man called Yonad, led the fleet instead. Yonad was level-headed and steadfast, a fantastic mentor to Alexis. The man even had the wisdom to make Alexis his second in command. When the retribution fleet arrived in the Foul system to prepare to intercept a traitor fleet, the warp storms tragically caused a number of ships to perish, including the one carrying Captain Yonad, killing the captain. Bit of an L there. Command fell to Alexis Polux, who was like, bruh, what the fuck? His imposter syndrome flared hard, but instead of letting it hold him back and freeze his indecision, he began turbo preparing, drilling his men extremely hard in a very specific fleet battle style, a style very different to Sigismund's. It was highly tactical, unusual for Imperial Fist standards, and relied on enemy aggression. Even Pollux pushed himself to exhaustion every day in training, becoming even mightier in boarding actions than he already was. After months of non-stop drilling and preparing, the Imperial Fists were more ready than they ever had been. This is when the Iron Warriors arrived, led by Perturabo himself. The 4th Legion had more warships, more marines, and a Primarch. However, their overconfidence was nearly their undoing. Perturabo expected to face Sigismund, leading a classic Imperial Fist fleet strategy of more or less creating a stagnant fortress of warships intermingled with the occasional daring action as befitting Sigismund's zeal and warrior spirit. Instead, what he got was Alexis running a mobile fortress strategy, his fleet constantly in motion, punishing aggressive Iron Warrior ships by rapidly swarming them, boarding them, and then disengaging. The Iron Warriors were shocked by the sheer audacity of the Imperial Fist boarding actions, as well as how effective the boarders were. Unstoppable squads of boarding shield-wielding Imperial Fists struck out at dozens of Iron Warrior ships, either disabling key systems to leave the ship open to being destroyed or just outright taking it. What was even more shocking was when Pollux saw an opportunity and sent a boarding force to assault Perturabo's flagship, the Ironblood, directly, with the intent on assassinating the Primarch of the Iron Warriors. Those warriors successfully boarded Perturabo's ship, something that wasn't even considered an option by the Iron Warriors. At this point, all signs, trajectories, and statistics pointed towards a costly, Pyrrhic Imperial Fist victory, a third of Dawn's sons taking out the majority of the Iron Warrior Legion. However, then something unfortunate happened. An astropathic message arrived from Dawn, which was Dawn issuing a total recall of all Imperial forces to return to Terra to reinforce it immediately. Pollux was torn. On one hand, he could wipe out the Iron Warriors. On the other hand, he had received direct orders from his Primarch to return to Terra, and there seemed to be a small but clear path through the warp storms home. So he made the hard decision to order a withdrawal. Despite trying to do it as tactically as possible, the Iron Warriors sensed the retreat and became hyper-aggressive, killing many of Pollux's ships, with only a small force of the original Retribution fleet making it to the warp jump. To Pollux's credit, he personally teleported on board an Iron Warrior ship during the withdrawal, slaughtered the warriors on board, and then took the ship with him, like a fucking badass. Perturabo was extremely disturbed by the events of the battle. He knew he was going to lose, and only won due to his foe randomly routing for no clear reason. He was also directly attacked on his own flagship, being forced to engage the boarding Imperial Fists in melee combat. Worst of all, barely anyone had heard of this Pollux fellow outside the Legion. He nearly got outplayed by a fucking nobody. This is when Perty went full paranoid fuck everyone mode, isolating himself from his Legion, who he saw as weak, and building the Iron Circle robots as his new honor guard. In a strange twist of events, that warp jump did not return Pollux and his fleet back to Terra, but instead took them to Macragge, where they were united with the Ultramarine Legion. Pollux and Guilliman spoke, with Guilliman remembering Pollux due to his massive size and keen mind. Pollux also expressed his regret at letting Perturabo live and withdrawing his forces from the Foul system. Pollux was then given orders to help reinforce Macragge and Ultramar, using his keen Imperial Fist mind to spot dozens of flaws and weaknesses in the Ultramarines' defense network. He also met the loyalist Iron Warrior Warsmith Dantiok, and whilst at first there was hostility due to the Legion's known rivalry, they quickly began to appreciate each other's vast pool of knowledge and how well they synergized. It gave us a tragic glimpse of what could have been if Rogel and Perty actually worked together and liked each other. Pollux's next time to shine would bring him into a direct punch-on with a Primarch. You heard that right. See, Conrad Curse loosed himself upon Macragge and was causing issues for everyone. He first attacked the first master of the Ultramarines, killing him but being shocked by how tenacious and durable the Ultramarine was, before he then turned his attention on Pollux. Now, Conrad should have been able to wipe the floor with any Space Marine. However, two factors allowed Pollux to not only survive, but actually wound Conrad. Firstly, the dude is a beast. I cannot emphasize just how large and strong Pollux was. Secondly, Dantiok was using the Pharos device, an alien mini Astronomicon, to be able to see through Conrad's shadow ambush bullshit hacks and also communicate with and warn Alexis about Conrad's angles of attack. So Conrad would spring out of the shadows expecting to take Pollux unawares, however Dantiok would be like, "To your left!" So Pollux would swing a left hook that would then connect with Conrad's face. Basically, Pollux had a version of foresight in this fight, with the Pharos device fucking with Conrad's foresight. However, this could not last, and eventually Conrad got the upper hand, but before he could kill the mighty Pollux, Dantiok's love of his friend allowed him to use the Pharos device to teleport Pollux to Sothar, the world the Pharos was on, saving him from a frustrated Conrad. For a little bit of context on how that works, the Pharos device was based on empathy and emotion, not just on raw technology. So not only did Pollux outplay and nearly beat Perturabo, but he also punched up Conrad and then survived. I can't think of many other Space Marines that can claim the same thing. Pollux stayed on Sothar with Dantiok and helped reinforce the planet, something that would end up being a very good idea as a large force of Night Lords, significantly larger than Sothar's garrison of Ultramarines, Guardsmen, and Imperial Fists, a garrison that was deliberately kept smallest to not attract attention, invaded. Despite being outnumbered 10 to 1, Alexis and Sothar's small army made the Night Lords pay for every step they took. They drowned the murderers and sadists of the Night Lord Legion in their own blood, but eventually the numbers were overwhelming and the Night Lords broke through, capturing Alexis and torturing him to force Dantiok to do what they wanted. They were fascinated by the Pharos device until Dantiok overloaded it and blew their tits off, sacrificing himself in the process. At a similar time, an Ultramarine relief force arrived and slaughtered most of the remaining Night Lords. Alexis held his dying Iron Warrior friend, his brother, weeping and not letting anyone touch him until Guilliman himself arrived and ordered him to stand tall. Now here is mostly where Alexis's Horus Heresy lore ends. However, we can assume he joined Guilliman's force in its race to Terra, with his few thousand surviving Imperial Fists from the Retribution fleet. After the heresy, Pollux was honored for his deeds by Rogel Dawn himself, being chosen as the founder and first chapter master of the Crimson Fists, a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists known for their practicality, versatility, and problem solving. Some people call them the Imperial Fist Ultramarines, which makes sense. Pollux spent a lot of time with the Ultramarines and his tactics aligned heavily with theirs. However, it is no insult. He would lead his chapter with pride and honor for 8 centuries, becoming one of the oldest Space Marines in the Imperium, leading his forces to defeat the Elder on Uralek Prime. This legend would eventually meet his end in a wildly nerdy, badass way. His chapter was fighting against the fierce Xeno threat known as the Scythians, wildly powerful warrior monks who had venomous weapons. They were a nightmare to deal with. Even rougher was Alexis getting shot in the head with a venomous dart. Always wear your helmets, kids. The venom was so potent that even a Space Marine's body as mighty as Pollux's couldn't resist it. As he lay on his deathbed, his near-death clarity and unbreakable will allowed him to formulate an effective strategy to deal with the Scythians before he finally passed. That strategy was so effective against the Scythians that they were slaughtered and had their homeworld razed, only a few scattering in the galaxy to survive. The Scythians forever remembered that defeat and no longer challenged the Imperium in open war. R.I.P. Alexis, you were a real one. May you and Dantioch forever rest in the Emperor's golden halls. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Crimson Fist model, or any of the other dozens and dozens of major minis available now. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more large and in charge content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.